Today we're taking a look at the Benson Amps Stonk Box Fuzz. Benson Amps has had this kind of uncanny ability to release pedals that feel targeted directly at me. The preamp, their first offering, obviously was exactly what I wanted when it came out and became an immediate staple on my board. It's one of my most used drive pedals of all time. It's one of the earliest dedicated videos to a specific pedal on this channel in general. The Germanium Fuzz, their temperature controlled pickup simulating fuzz pedal, was I think the first fuzz pedal I demoed on this channel. And the reason I gelled with it so well was because not for its fuzz side, this incredibly smooth, tame fuzz that worked well for my setup, but the ability to dial back into these big, classy cleans that were very perfect for the kind of clean ambient thing I was into at the time. The Germanium Boost obviously became the boost that made me love boost pedals. It's currently on the board. You've struggled to see me do a video without it since its release. It has been a day one staple on almost every rig I've made. And I didn't know I wanted a boost pedal before it came out. And here we are today. If you've been watching this channel for any amount of time, you will know that my kind of musical tendencies and evolution has really moved over the years from this clean, low gain, ambient focused thing to a major focus on drive, texture, big kind of like throwback rock tones to the mid-2000s, as well as some more experimental, weird, high gain things that we've kind of touched on this channel. A lot of like post-hardcore, but written with non-traditional post-hardcore pedal elements. That original Benson Fuzz release was something really, really killer, and something that I still do find a lot of value in, even with its limitations being its fairly smooth, kind of almost demure fuzz tone and a lack of tone control. But I have found myself over the years kind of gravitating towards hairier, grittier, more texture-focused drive circuits. And today we are taking a look at Benson's latest foray back into dirt and Benson's most wild release so far. This is the Benson Stonk Box. It is another germanium fuzz pedal, including that temperature controlled germanium diode technology from the original fuzz pedal, but modeled after the old vintage Make One fuzz pedals, and it has an insane amount of grit and character. But in classic Benson fashion, it's also been expanded on, refined, and made more versatile than the circuit it is based on. While the original Mark I fuzz is a two-knob, simple, classic circuit, here you have four controls. You have your tone, volume, filter, and trim, and the way they interact with each other gives you an insane amount of tonality. Tone and volume are pretty straightforward. Volume is the overall output of your pedal, and that's very helpful because this thing gets incredibly loud. The tone control is a low filter that does kind of some subtle dampening of the highs. It's understated, it's not woolly. It really kind of helps hairy up this pedal and then kind of like bring it back in so it sits in your mix well. Trim is going to be your kind of like input gain stage. It's going to be the amount of gain going into the front of the two transistors. Maxing it out is basically the kind of like stock Mark I fuzz sound, and dialing it back from there will allow you to kind of pull together a wealth of medium to low gain distortion, drive, even broken clean boost sounds. And filter is going to adjust the kind of gain and bias point of that first clipping stage in the pedal. And because you've got those two stages, the ability to kind of like independently control that first clipping stage in tandem with that trim control. You can control how much you hit those two gain stages, as well as how that first gain stage reacts in a lot of ways. And what that gives you is, between just those two controls, a ton of different fuzz textures and interesting distortion and clipping sounds in this pedal. With that filter dialed back, you can get everything from kind of like dying battery, reduced bass response, all the way up through rich, full frequency, harmonically rich fuzz sounds. I have to say, there's a lot of very raucous, chaotic sounds in this thing, so the inclusion of that low pass tone control is a lifesaver, and you'll hear us use that a ton when we get into our sound samples. So let's dive in, let's take a look at the pedal board and really kind of like put the Stonk Box through its paces and see what happens when you really just kind of like blow the sides out of a Mark I fuzz. As always, before we get into our sound samples, let's go ahead and talk through the signal chain and the context we're working in. I am playing my Jennings Navigator with Lambertone's Crema pickups into the Bondi Squish As compressor, the Benson Germanium Boost, the Benson Stonk Box, and the Grobert Effects Chorus. From there we go to the Strymon El Cap, the Neunaber Illumine, and our amplifiers, which are the Ruby and Dream by Universal Audio, in a stereo pair in parallel via the GFI duophony. We've got everything bypassed except for a hint of reverb and our amplifiers. This is what that sounds like. So we've got everything kind of set up right now to be as close to kind of vintage correct as possible. In the manual for the Stonk Box, these are the settings for what they call stock vintage. So it's going to be the most kind of like Mark I style fuzz possible, and then we'll immediately start getting into everything. We'll basically use this setting to kind of run through our tone and volume really quick, and then we'll spend a little bit more time playing with those filter and trim controls. Yeah, it's chaotic. This is exactly what I was talking about in terms of just feeling like at its most wide open, it gets really kind of hairy and bombastic and raucous, which is why I love this tone control. I mean, you can hear how immediate that And I mean, you can tell also with that trim all the way up, this pedal is, well, trim up and that filter a fair way up, this pedal is loud. I mean, you can hear that we are absolutely decimating the input levels on the amplifiers, which kind of do a good job of emulating that kind of like tube compression, but within the range of them being able to do that as digital amps, where when you really crank that, it really starts to, you can feel that squish happen. Let's start to fine tune this pedal a little bit more. So this trim control is basically going to be the input gain ahead of the circuit itself. So dialing that back is the quickest way to start achieving not completely blown apart textures. Immediately you go from, you know, full saturation into something with some dynamic and some crunch. And something with a little bit of like dynamic range based on your picking. Obviously at 0, you get nothing because you've completely zeroed out your input gain. But even at those really low levels, you'll notice with that filter up, controlling your kind of like bias and gain level on that first transistor, you're not going to get cleans out of this yet. You can kind of get something approximating a clean. But even between any two notes, that harmonic buildup is immediate. But those super low trim settings, especially on a neck pickup like this, do give me a lot of really great kind of dusty, broken, cool kind of textural pieces, especially in like a very like ambient context. Dial back a little bit of that tone. This is a good time to start to dig into that filter control because you'll notice we're still getting that kind of like low end pressure and some of that, that's still a lot of that clipping. As we dial that back, this is where the dynamics start to really kind of like come into play. Okay, let's take that El Cap back out and get back to kind of what we were doing. So let's take that trim back up a little bit, set the filter back up high, and then we'll start to work our filter back. So let's set the trim kind of right about there. Properly angry sounding, and work that filter back to see kind of how the gain stage of that first transistor starts to change and what the low end response looks like as you kind of dial it back. If you take the filter completely out, or all the way down, I should say. Take that trim to as close to 0 as you can get, and then bring it back up with volume. So we'll take it back to there. There's a lot of really interesting textures by kind of min-maxing the two sides. So like take that trim all the way up and that filter all the way down. And it takes you from to